Hello great minds, you're welcome back to class. It's another time to learn something new and interesting. Last class we discussed figures of speech as poetic devices. We discussed simile, metaphor, personification, euphemism, oxymoron, irony and hyperbole. In today's class we'll be learning figures of sound, which is also a poetic device or poetic devices. Figures of sound refers to figures of speech that introduces sound effects or flavor to a poem. This means that those words that ensure or that brings about the presence of sound in a poem. Those are what we refer to as figures of sound. They can also be referred to, or they can also be called sound devices. And it's important to note that the reason or the purpose of sound devices or figures of sound is to attract the audience. There are several sound devices, but in today's class we'll be discussing alliteration, consonants, consonants, onomatopoeia, refrain, and repetition. Alliteration is a figure of speech that has to do with the repetition of consonant sound, most likely at the beginning of a word. Consonant sound. Now, we're not talking about consonant letters, we're talking about consonant sound. When we have repetition of same or similar consonant sound at the beginning of a word in a line of a poem. For example, Father Friday fried fish on Friday. So if you observe that at the beginning of each word, we have the sound f as in father, as in fry, as in fried, Friday, fried, fish, and Friday again. So we see that there's a repetition of the sound sound f. So that's what alliteration is all about. Let's look at this other example. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. We have the repetition of the sound po at the beginning of each word in the line of this poem. Then the third example, Larry's lizard likes logging on land. We have the sound l being repeated at the beginning of these words. So these are examples of alliteration. Consonants is also the repetition of consonant sound, and now most likely at the end of a word. For example, the first and last brush sweep fast and burst. We have the sound t in first, we have the sound t in last, we have the sound t in fast, we have the sound t in burst. So basically, the difference between alliteration and consonants is the positioning of consonant sound. Alliteration basically have the consonant sounds at the beginning of a word, while consonants have the consonant sound at the end or other parts of a word. Now moving to the third figure of sound, which is assonance. Assonance has to do with the repetition of vowel sound of word line of a poem. Let's look at these examples. Our echoes roll from soul to soul. Our echoes roll from soul to soul. We have the sound O in echo, we have the sound O in roll, we have the sound soul, O in soul, and so. So these are vowel sound, the sound O. So when we have repetition of vowels called assonance. Let's look at this other example. Amu bought an amplifier in Adamawa. Look at these words. We have a in Adam, a in an, a in amplifier, a in Adamawa. So these are sounds that is being repeated in line of a poem. These are examples of consonants. Now moving to the first figure sound, which is Normatopia, when sound of words are used to suggest the meaning of the word. That is, a word that sounds like the noise it describes. We have a lot of words. We have sound like boom, woo, oops, crash, ahahaha, move. Let's look at these examples. He splashed water on me. The underlined word here is splashed, 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 splashed. The word sounds like the noise of waters. We have other example, the coin jingles, the tick-tock of a clock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Yeah, this is the sound that a clock makes, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So when you use words like this to indicate the sound of a thing, it's called onomatopoeia. Ding dong of the doorbell. No, the bell, the sound of the bell is ding dong, ding dong. So when you use words like this, is what we refer to as onomatopoeia. Another one is the car zoomed off. Repetition is also a figure of sound. Repetition, this is when a word is repeated in the line of a poem, and this is for the sake of emphasis. Is when a word is being repeated, is used over and over in the same poem. Let's look at this poem, Let My Mother Sing by Akim Ajibade. If you look at line stanza 1 and stanza 2, you have repetition of the word having, having, having. In the 3 stanzas, the word having is being repeated. Also, if you look at stanza 1 and stanza 3, the word crawled, crawled is being repeated. So these are examples of repetition. When a word is used more than once in a poem, it is called repetition. Finally, talking about refrain. Refrain is a figure of sound. This is the repetition of a line, not just one word now, but a line or phrase in a poem, and this usually occurs at the end of each stanza. Still looking at the poem Let My Mother Sing by Akim Ajibade, if you look at the last line of the poem, we have the repetition of the word ooh, 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 ooh. The 5th and 6th line are being repeated. Now you see, who will hinder my mother from singing? That's in the first stanza. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Now look at stanza 2. Who will hinder my mother from singing? Ooh, ooh, ooh. Stanza 3. Who will hinder my mother from singing? Ooh, ooh, ooh. So you see that these words, these lines are being repeated in each stanza. So when we have something like this, this is what we call refrain. This is what we call refrain. If you also remember the poem My Mother by Anne Taylor, if you observe, the last line of each stanza has the phrase my mother, my mother, my mother, my mother. So the repetition of this phrase in each of the stanza is what we refer to as refrain in poetry. Hope you now understand what figures of sound are and the various types of figure of sound that we have in literature. Thanks for listening. See you in the next class. Bye.